When we think of the Christmas season, we think of pure joy, right? Light, celebration, all of that. But what if I told you that just 3 days after Christmas, the church calendar hits pause to remember something truly harrowing? That day is December 28th, the Feast of the Holy Innocents. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the story behind this day of sorrow and figure out its pretty profound meaning.
It really is a jarring question, isn't it? I mean, how can a season that's all about celebrating new life have a day dedicated to such a brutal act of violence against children? To understand why this day of remembrance is even here, we have to go all the way back to the very beginning of the story.
All right, so to really get this, we've got to go back to the source, the Gospel of Matthew. And this is where the story starts, not with a peaceful celebration, but with some serious political tension and what one deeply paranoid king saw as a massive threat. And the path to this tragedy, well, it escalates shockingly fast. It all kicks off when the Magi show up in Jerusalem asking around for a newborn king of the Jews. Now, you got to understand, King Herod was this notoriously insecure and absolutely brutal ruler. He wasn't born to the throne. Rome put him there. So the news of a legitimate prophesied king, that felt like a direct threat to his shaky grip on power. He tries to trick the Magi into telling him where the child is, but they get warned in a dream and basically blow him off. And when Herod realizes he's been played, his political fear just boils over into pure rage, and that leads directly to his horrific decree.
And this is the heart of the feast. The holy innocents are the young children of Bethlehem who became the tragic victims of Herod's desperate power play to get rid of Jesus. They were literally caught in the crossfire of this epic conflict. A clash between a fragile, earthly king and an unstoppable divine plan.
So, why that specific title, Holy Innocents? Well, the church's reasoning is pretty clear, and it comes down to 3 things. First, and this is the most obvious one, they were completely innocent of any crime. They were just babies. Second, their deaths weren't random. They lost their lives specifically because of Christ. And third, that direct link transforms them. They're not just victims, they become the very first witnesses, the first to testify to the reality of Jesus' birth with their own lives.
And this is where the story goes from being a historical event to a deep spiritual idea. See, the church doesn't just remember these children as victims, it honors them as the very first Christian martyrs.
The story really sets up this stark contrast, a tale of 2 totally opposite forces. On one side, you have Herod's fear, this desperate, clinging fear of losing a status and control that just spirals into violence and terrible injustice. And on the other side, you have God's light, embodied in the birth of Jesus. This light is a hope so powerful that it enters the world and just keeps shining, even when faced with the most brutal resistance imaginable.
Now, these children are honored as martyrs by circumstance, and what that means is, obviously as infants, they couldn't make a conscious choice to die for their faith. But because their deaths were so tied to Jesus, their fate became this incredibly powerful testimony. They didn't bear witness with words, they bore witness with their very lives, proving that Christ's arrival was a big enough deal to shake the foundations of worldly power.
So how did this awful event become a feast day that has endured for centuries? Well, this commemoration isn't some modern thing. In fact, the Feast of the Holy Innocents is one of the oldest in the Christian calendar, a solemn memory that's been preserved across the ages.
The way we mark this feast has definitely evolved over time. It was formally established way back in the 4th century. Then, through the Middle Ages, it was known as a really somber day of quiet reflection, kind of a pause in the middle of all the Christmas festivities. And today, its focus has shifted a bit, becoming a powerful moment to call for the protection of all children and to pray for the most vulnerable people in our world.
As with so many ancient traditions, the church uses really powerful symbols to tell this story. The liturgy for December 28th is packed with meaning, and it uses specific elements that make it stand out from the joy of the rest of the Christmas season.
The most striking symbol is, without a doubt, the color. The rest of the Christmas season is usually marked by joyful white or gold, but on this day, priests wear red, and that red is a stark, powerful visual reminder of blood and martyrdom, honoring the sacrifice of these very first witnesses.
So, what are we supposed to take away from this somber moment in such a joyful season? Well, the liturgy really drills down on a few key lessons. First, that Christ's arrival isn't just a cozy story. It's a direct challenge to worldly powers built on fear and control.
Second, it shows that God's plan for salvation keeps moving forward even in the face of human darkness and sin. And finally, and maybe this is the most important one, it's a profound statement that God never ever forgets the innocent who suffer.
Okay, so we've looked at the history, the theology, the symbols, but why does this 2,000-year-old story still hit home today? Well, the feast is really designed to push us past just remembering something that happened a long time ago and toward a deep reflection on the world we're living in right now.
The feast's first challenge is a really direct one, and it's aimed squarely at our society today. It forces us to ask a tough question. How do we, in our own time, actually value and protect the lives of children and the most vulnerable people among us?
At its core, Herod's horrific act was driven by fear, the fear of losing control. And that makes this story a timeless case study in how fear can create unbelievable injustice. It really makes us look at our own world and ask, when we see injustice, how do we respond? Do we react out of that same kind of fear, or do we have the courage to choose compassion instead?
Ultimately, this day isn't just about reflection. It's a call to action. It challenges us to actively build a world that reflects God's light, not Herod's fear. It's asking each of us to think about how we can become a real, tangible source of peace and safety for the vulnerable people in our own communities.
So, this is the lasting legacy of the Holy Innocents. They aren't just remembered for the tragedy of how they died, but for the profound truths their story reveals. They stand as these eternal symbols of innocence, as constant reminders of our need for compassion, and as a powerful sign that no one, especially the smallest and most vulnerable, is ever forgotten. It's a somber but a deeply necessary message, placed right in the heart of the Christmas season.